everybody. I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for coming to the summit and especially my session. I just wanted to say hi. I will be off in the little corner, but it's always nice to just kind of see each other full screen. I'm not seeing you, but I will be in the chat chatting with you. So let's dig in to measurement and number sense combined. Okay, we are talking about making the most of measurement and how we can meet those measurement standards while still building our students' number sense in the early grades. I would love to hear about any takeaways that you have. So you can find me at Build Math Minds, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. I'm not on them all that often, but I will be checking stuff during this summit. If you don't know me, that is me with my family. My husband and I have known each other since we were little. I say that he is my kindergarten sweetheart, but he didn't know it at the time. We now have 4 children. This photo was taken a few years ago. So our oldest is a junior down to 6th grade. I got my elementary education degree and went into teaching mathematics, and I was a very traditional teacher. So the things that you hear me talk about now were definitely not how I had started teaching. It's what I call myself a recovering traditionalist now. And that started when I was getting my master's degree at Boise State University. There's a whole group of us there that were part of a program, and our supervisor had said, we're all just recovering traditionalists, and that has stuck with me forever. So you are free to take that name as well. That's me. I'm a recovering traditionalist, and now I get to work with elementary teachers in helping you build your own math mind so that we can build the math minds of students. So today you are here to talk about measurement. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the measurement standards, what they are, the 8 number sense concepts. I'm going to do that super quick because I do have like full courses, like 10 hours about the 8 number sense concepts in K2 and the 8 number sense concepts in 3 through 5. But I also just have free videos. If you go to my YouTube page or the blog, The Recovering Traditionalist, you can find all kinds of stuff about number sets. So I'm just going to briefly go over those, okay, in case you're not familiar with them. And then we're going to talk about 3 math experiences that we should be giving our students. And I'll briefly touch on why. There's a whole lot more about that. But again, this is just brief because what we're really here for is to talk about ways that we can combine measurement and number sense, because number sense is a huge, huge deal in pre-K through 2nd grade, but we can't leave off the other stuff. So let's talk about measurement standards. So if you're not familiar with this document, this comes from Achieve the Core. These are the grade level focuses. They have them for each grade, but not pre-K. So I'll share a little bit about pre-K. So to start with K, this is the overview, and then I'm going to zoom in on these. But before I talk about them, there's really fine print down at the bottom, and I'm going to zoom in on that on here, and it's still pretty fine print, but it says at least 65% up to approximately 85% of class time with grades K2 near that upper end of that range should be devoted to the major work of the grade. Okay, so 65 to 85, and 85% is K2. That's what they're saying. And in K2, 85% of your class time should be devoted to the major work at your grade level. So let's take a look at kindergarten. If you look at the green squares are your major things. Those are the things that we should be spending 85% of kindergarten time helping students build. And if you notice, none of that is measurement, right? There are some measurement things, but none of the major work is measurement. When we go to 1st grade, there's a whole lot of major work in 1st grade. One of those is measurement. Measure lengths indirectly or by iterating length units. One of them is measurement. In 2nd grade, we get a little bit more. Here we get measure and estimate lengths in standard units, and then relate addition and subtraction to lengths. So a lot of the measurement ideas in K through 2 really do coordinate with our number standards as well. Okay. So pre-K, again, like I said, they didn't have those focus documents, but from what I found about pre-K, these are kind of the big things that you're focusing on in pre-K when it comes to measurement. These are the things for measurement. not necessarily the focus. Sorry, I maybe shouldn't have the grade level focuses on that slide, because pre-K is all about numbers, counting, right? But you are doing some things like talking about whether it's big or small, heavy or light, tall or short. You're looking at which one is bigger or smaller, and you're ordering shapes and objects by their size or you may not be using volume or even height, but kids are starting to organize things based upon those things. And we are trying to get them to use some of that vocabulary. Okay. All right. So to generalize this, I like to kind of come up with this big overview for my own brain. So in preschool, the big things around measurement that you are doing is developing vocabulary, and you are comparing and ordering objects by some way. Could be size, any length, height, weight. Kindergarten, you are still sorting and counting objects into categories. You are comparing them and describing them based on certain measurements. In first grade, you start to measure by iterating units. Typically, these are non-standard units. So you're not talking like inches or centimeters. You're having them measure by iterating and using paper clips or Post-it notes or something like that. This is also when you start to work on time. You're asking them to tell and write time, and then represent and interpret data. And then in second grade, we are measuring with standard units. This is where inches, feet, centimeters, that kind of stuff comes in. And you're relating addition and subtraction to those lengths. So if we add more lengths to it, or if we cut some off, that's subtraction. You're solving problems like word problems with time and money. And you're representing and interpreting data still in second grade. Okay. One of the interesting things that I thought in this is that there's only 2 parts in here where you're actually measuring. Like, measurement standards aren't just about measuring things. Okay? In first grade, you are measuring by iterating those units like I talked about, and you're measuring with standard units. But a whole lot of what we're doing with measurement has nothing to do with physically measuring, like with a ruler or anything like that, okay? It's doing all kinds of other things about it. So let's boil it down even more, and these are really the big ideas in pre-K to 2 that we are working with measurement. We need kids to use vocabulary to describe what they're seeing and what they're noticing about things. We have to get them to compare and sort based upon what they are seeing about things. They're counting to tell how many are this and how many are that. They're ordering them once they are comparing, right? Once they compare things, they'll order them by tallest to shortest or shortest to tallest, those kinds of things. They're iterating lengths. They're measuring and they're doing time and money with real life situations. They're using data and interpreting data. And then, of course, they are measuring with standard units, okay? So those were those big measurement concepts. Let's talk for a minute, well, a few minutes, sorry, it's not just going to be a minute, about number sense concepts, okay? This is my favorite quote from Howden. I'll let you read the whole thing, and then I'm going to point out the things that I like while I take a little drink here. And of course, the parts that I like are the ones that are different color. Number sense develops gradually. We need to let kids explore, visualize, and relate things. That is so huge around numbers. And for the longest time, it was always seen as, well, they either have number sense or they don't, right? The first part of this quote is, it's a good intuition. Well, if it's a good intuition, it makes it feel like we can't really teach that to kids. We can't help them develop it, but we definitely can. You'll see, like, Graham Fletcher's session is about number sense stuff as well. And we have similar things that we talk about, but sometimes some a little different. The 2 places that I love, the first one is Clements and Sarama. Doug Clements and Julie Sarama are fabulous early numeracy researchers, educators. I love everything that they have. If you've heard about the learning trajectories, they are the ones who created that. In a past virtual math summit, Doug did a session about learning trajectories, and I just can't get over it that he actually did a session for us. So if you're in the membership, you guys have access to all of our past summit sessions. I highly encourage you to go watch that one by Doug Clements. So what they found was 4 early numeracy concepts. It starts out with verbally counting. Those kids have to be able to count in order. You've heard kids when they are counting, it's kind of like their ABCs if they don't know the order yet. It's 1, 2, 5, 20, 30. They're just random, right? We need to get kids to be able to count in order and in the correct order. But just saying the numbers isn't enough. They need to understand that those numbers attach to something. They mean something. We count for a purpose. We count to tell how many. So they need to actually count objects when they're saying those words. And this is where the one-to-one stuff comes in, right? I call it one-to-one tagging, is when, and I can't remember what other researcher said that, and it's slightly different from one-to-one correspondence. So one-to-one tagging is when they attach one name to one object. So if you ask the child how many apples are in this picture, and they can attach 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You don't see me, but I'm touching my computer screen as I say those. And so they'll count out the 6 apples. Or if you ask how many fingers, and they would count each of the fingers. That's object counting, is when they can attach each number name to an object. And they're not double tapping. They aren't saying 2 numbers as they count, okay? The next one is cardinality. This is when they're done counting, they understand that the last word they say describes how many are in the set. And so a kid without cardinality, you'll hear this. When I ask how many apples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'll say, how many apples? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They can't just say 6. They don't see it as a set. They're still seeing the individual pieces. So cardinality is when a kid can actually answer that question, how many are there, after they have counted, okay? The last one that Clements and Sarama really highlight is this thing called subitizing. I don't care how you say it, you just need to know what it is. But it's being able to instantly recognize without counting. And so in this picture, if I were to ask a child, how many fingers is she holding up? And they can just instantly say 6. That's subitizing instead of having to count. They might say she has 5 and 1, and that's 6. That's still subitizing. It's known as conceptual subitizing, where they're seeing some parts within it. They don't just see 6, right? As adults, we don't even see 6, right? Most of us saw it as 5 and 1. So we are only able to perceptually subitize small amounts, typically 5 or under, unless they're in some kind of a familiar arrangement. Subitizing is such a powerful thing. So let's do a quick little introduction or assessment if you haven't really been exposed to it, or if you have, let's see how good we are at subitizing. You ready? There's going to become an amount on the screen, and then it's going to go away. I want you to tell me how many there are. Okay, how many did you see? Put it in the chat if you'd like. You can just keep it to yourself. Okay. And if we go back, it's 5. We know that. We're familiar with that pattern. But if your students aren't familiar with that pattern, if they haven't grown up playing dice games, they aren't able to subitize that amount, and they will be counting one by one to figure out how many that is. Okay, so subitizing activities are super important. And one of my favorites is what we just did, which is called a quick image. You show it, then it disappears. Okay, let's do another one. You ready? All eyes on the screen. Was that one a little bit harder for you? Right? So the subitizing is not just for pre-K to 2. It can transfer into helping our kids understand multiplication because we are asking them to see it quickly, right? We're subitizing how many was in each group and even how many groups. Do you notice that I didn't have the groups in a line? I had them set up just how kids tend to see 4. Like 4 is typically 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, or 2 on each side, whichever way you see it. But they're able to subitize each piece of that. Okay, now come back again. I'm going to show you another image. Are you ready? Here it comes. I totally did not leave that up long enough for you, probably, right? And it was on purpose because I want you to try to visualize what you saw. You may not have been able to grab it all, but just in your mind, try to visualize what it was. Could you describe it? I don't need the total. I just want to see if you could describe what the image was. And I'm going to come back. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 seconds, see if you can describe it, see if you can visualize it, pull that up in your brain. Okay, I'm going to show it again, but not for very long, and see if your visualization, if you need to modify your visualization at all. Okay, here it comes. That might not have been long enough either. The point is, I want you to pay attention to certain things. I'm not leaving it up there long enough for people to count. If I was doing this with students, I definitely would leave it up a little bit longer, but honestly, not much because I'm using subitizable images. I don't know if subitizable is a word, but I'm totally taking it. We're making it so. Uh, because they're used to a 10 frame, right? So we're familiar that if the top of the 10 frame is full, if kids have been using 10 frames in the early elementary, when they move into multiplication in third grade, we can be using 10 frames and subitizable images to help them see these things, okay? So subitizing is not just for the early grades, but it sets kids up to be able to visualize and hold amounts in their head that they wouldn't be able to if they didn't have these subitizable images, right? Okay, so beyond that, there's 4 more, and these come from what I call my math Bible. It's teaching student-centered mathematics. It originally, I found it first of all in the K3 version. That's been modified to be pre-K to 2. It now looks like this. I think this is the most current version of it. But the more that I've worked with students of all ages, all kids need these 4 relationships built around all types of numbers, not just whole numbers, but fractions, decimals. They need them for everything. But we're going to take a look at whole numbers, and then we're going to talk about how these, can help us as we're doing measurement stuff as well. The first number relationship that comes from Van de Waal and Friends is spatial relationships. When kids just see numerals, it does not tell them anything about the quantities, right? If I put these up there and ask kids to compare and contrast 3 and 4, what's the same, what's different, right? There's not much there. But if we have visuals to go with those numerals, now when I ask what's the same, what's different, I'm going to get a whole lot more interesting information that starts helping kids build connections between 3 and 4. Right? It's having visuals, but then helping kids see connections between those visuals. One of the connections that we really want to help them build is this idea of 1 and 2, more and less. If you're familiar with Rec and Recs, that's what we're showing on the screen here. The top Rec and Rec is showing 6, bottom Rec and Rec is showing 7. Because we read from left to right, the amounts get pushed over to the left, and those are the beads that are in play. We need kids to instantly be able to tell us 1 and 2, more and less. As they progress up, that becomes 1 or 2, 10 more and less, or tenths more and less, or 100 more or less, or even fractional amounts, 1/4 more, 2/3 less. Kids need to be able to do those instantaneously. Okay, so we got to build that relationship as well. And then benchmarks of 5 and 10 is how they talk about it in the book. With kids need to be able to see how numbers relate to 5 and 10 because we are a base 10 system and 2 5s make a 10. They really need to know how numbers relate to 5 and 10. But that's not where it stops, right? They need to understand how numbers relate to 50 and 100, to a half and a whole. When it comes to measurement, can you think about some benchmarks that might be helpful, right? Getting to the next foot, to the next centimeter, if you have like a half a centimeter, right? There's all kinds of benchmarks in our measurement world, depending upon what measurement system you are a part of, okay? The last one that they talk about in that book is part, whole. There's been a lot of talk to change that to part, total, because as they're working with fractional amounts, the whole isn't really a whole. But this is how they talk about it in their book, so that's how I've left it, is part, whole. Understanding that you could take a whole and break it into lots of different parts, but that all these different parts can come together to make the same whole, right? If I have 1 and 6, that's the same as having 2 and 5 because they come together to make 7. And it's really helpful to have the visuals as well. That's what I have off to the side, is all the ways that you can break apart 7, okay? So now that we've talked about those 8 number sense concepts, again, it's super fast. I know if you want more info on that, like I said, I've got YouTube videos out there that will explain them more in depth. Now we're going to talk about 3 math experiences, and then we're going to bring it together with our measurement standards, our number sense concepts, and these 3 math experiences. And I'm going to give you some examples of each that you could be doing in your classroom with your students, okay? So if you're not familiar with this chart right here, you should be. It is the most current document about what works for students who are struggling in mathematics. This was put together by the What Works Clearinghouse and IES. I always find it by just Googling assisting students struggling with mathematics, but they're now on version 2 of this, and this is the one that is the most recent. This is hyperlinked in my slides. So once you download the slides, you can just click on that link and it'll take you to the most recent one. Here's my warning though. Don't just read the headlines here. I know I'm only showing you the headlines because this is not the main part of what we're doing today. But especially if you work with kids who are in need of intervention, go in, read this full document, take time absorbing what they talk about and what they say this actually looks like, okay? So to me, there are the 3 math experiences that every kid should be having are number routines, word problems, and games. Those 3 things should be incorporated as much as possible into your math time, if not every single day. And here's the basis for why. I mean, I love them, but we need to have research that helps back these up. So number routines are a way to do some of that systematic instruction. You can start with things that are that kids already know, and then you work to connect it to things that you're needing to work on now. That's part of the systematic instruction, is really being methodical about how you're presenting information and connecting it to things that they already know. Mathematical language. We need to be using clear and concise language ourselves and then helping our students do the same. And one of the best ways is when you get kids talking in number routines. Okay. Representations are super huge. They talk a lot in this document about visuals and getting kids to represent and visualize and show mathematics. It's not just about the algorithms. They need to have experience with the concrete and semi-concrete. Concrete's like manipulatives. Semi-concrete is drawings. The drawings could be of the manipulatives. And then the 4th one here of number lines. Number lines are huge, and they are basically a ruler. Okay, we need to be using lots of number lines, but the recommendation is that number lines should not happen until the end of 1st grade, moving into 2nd grade. Before that, we should be using number paths. And again, I do have videos out there about number paths versus number lines, and number paths should be used in kindergarten and definitely beginning of 1st grade. Okay, okay, so those 4, the information in there justifies the use of number routines. Word problems, definitely number 5, because it's all about word problems. We need to help kids develop an understanding of the applications of the mathematics, what it looks like in context. We can use number lines as kids are solving those problems. Encourage them to use number lines to draw representations of what they're seeing. And then we move into games. Games are my favorite way to have kids practice. I love that I can include lots of visuals, lots of different representations inside of games. I encourage you to allow kids to use number lines, draw number lines while they're solving problems within the games, okay? And of course, we want to encourage them to use precise language and mathematical language when they are working on these games with partners, and encourage each other and ask each other to say that in different ways so that they could be using mathematical terms. Okay, so number routines, word problems, and games. And I'm going to leave the elephant in the room for you to go investigate about timed activities, because I know people have very strong opinions on that. However, I really encourage you to go read what they talk about those timed activities, because it's not the type of timed activities we grew up with, okay, that damaged many of us. So go in, read these documents for yourself, and make your own opinion about what the research says about these. Okay, drum roll. Let's get into what you actually came here for. The examples about how we combine measurement and number concepts into those 3 types of activities: number routines, word problems, and games. Okay, so again, a reminder of what measurement looks like in pre-K to 2. Okay, we need to be getting kids to do all of these things throughout their time in pre-K to 2. And typically we kind of leave it towards the end, or sometimes it might be just right in the middle of our textbook time, throughout the year, and we don't revisit it. So wherever your measurement unit is totally fine. you can leave it there, but I really want to encourage you to be doing these 3 activities all year long. You might have to do some measurement stuff to kind of refresh their memory about what measurements they are going to be using, refresh their memory about the difference between an inch and a foot, all of those kinds of things. But we want to be sprinkling these measurement activities throughout the year. So it's not just a 1 month we're working on measurement and then we're done. Okay. So a daily number routine that is pretty popular is like number of the day, or maybe you're doing calendar and you talk about whatever number it is that day on the calendar. So go ahead and do that, but attach this idea of asking kids, how long is the number? And they'll be like, how long is the number? But it's all about building the number. So, one day you might say, okay, if I built our number with these cubes, how long do you think it would be? Would it be longer than my hand, longer than my arm, longer than my head? All of those kinds of, because let's say number of the day is 12. They know it's going to be 12 blocks. You're not asking that. You're asking them to compare it to something else. Okay. So they have to say, I think it's going to be about the length of something, and they can make their predictions, record it, talk to a partner. You can put the predictions up on the board and you can switch it out. It doesn't have to be blocks every time. You could say, okay, today we're building our number with paper clips. How long do you think these paper clips will be if our number today is 24? Or sticky notes, whatever it might be. You're going to switch it up so that they have to start comparing these to different amounts. Okay. And then you build it, of course, and then compare the lengths. So according to our big measurement ideas, these were what we just showed on a previous slide, but I'm just putting it in a list. When you do this activity, you can really focus on vocabulary, getting kids to describe things. You're comparing, they are counting, and you're often iterating lengths. Iterating lengths is you're taking that one length and you're copying it over and over and over again, how many ever times you need. So if the number is 13, you're copying it for 13 of those things. Okay. So that is basically what measuring is. You're iterating an amount over and over and over again. That might be an inch. It might be a paper clip. Okay. So that's the idea with the number routine. You're doing a routine that you're already doing. You're just attaching some measurement ideas to it. Okay. Another one is estimation. Okay? I call this situation estimation. So you do need some benchmarks, right? We've talked about this, benchmarks. Let me come back to this really quickly also. When you're doing this activity, you're doing lots of counting. Okay. You might even be subitizing if when you're building it with the cubes, if you change your color every 5, that's highlighting how a number relates to 5 and relates to 10. So you can do lots of these ideas. You're doing part whole. You're doing one more because you're adding one as you go along. Okay. So I want you to keep in mind, because I might forget sometimes, to highlight it. What number sense concepts can we be addressing as we're doing this measurement routine as well? So estimation, situation, this one, what prompted me is the benchmark, because benchmarks of 5 and 10 are huge, but when it comes to measurement, there's different kinds of benchmarks, right? But we want kids to understand and use kind of reference to help them see what those measurements kind of are like. So like 1 centimeter is about the width of a finger. Your thumb, the width of a thumb is about an inch. Is that going to be true for everybody? No. But you have kids measure and see those things. How wide is a sticky note? Well, the average sticky note's about 3 inches. So you get these things that are, like kind of standard units that you could use and have kids use to compare and use as estimation to think about how long or wide or tall something might be. So for this routine, you're going to display a new object for them to measure, but you're going to have the students individually estimate using their preferred benchmark measure. You're not going to tell them which benchmark to use. So I highly recommend creating like some kind of anchor chart that shows some of your benchmark measurements. So like the sticky note being 3 inches, a thumb being an inch, that kind of thing. And each kid gets to pick their own. And then they're going to share with a partner, and then you share with a group as well. So the same measurements. So you're measuring the same object. You're looking at the same object and measuring, and in estimation, because you're not going up there and actually measuring it. You're just estimating. But everybody's going to have different things because somebody might say, well, I think that's going to be 2 sticky notes tall. Well, I think that's about 9 of my thumbs. Well, will those compare? Are those the same? Are they going to be the same? Who do you think's right in this, right? So you use your benchmark tools, but let the kids pick which benchmark is nice for them. Once you get a bit more comfortable with it, you could make kids pick, everybody, let's take your estimation. Tell me how many sticky notes tall you think this is going to be. And then, of course, you do the actual measurement and see it. And if you want to extend this, you can put the data into a bar graph and then look at, okay, it was 9 thumb widths, it was 3 sticky notes, it was, all of that, and create it into some kind of a bar graph or some kind of graph for the kids. Doesn't have to be a bar graph. Okay. So some of the things that we're building with this, again, it's benchmarks, right? We are doing some of that spatial relationships with things because we're comparing, we're sorting, we're counting, we're iterating links. Of course, you want to encourage that description of it and vocabulary as you're talking about what they're doing, okay? One of my favorite routines is quick images, which I showed with subitizing earlier. But what's that look like when we're dealing with ideas of measurement? Okay, so if you're not on the screen, come back to me. Make sure you can see my video. If you're in the chat and you're chatting about something, come on back and take a look because I'm going to quickly show an image and then it's going to disappear. Are you ready? Here it comes. Okay, I had the automation set for 3 seconds. It started to dissolve at 3 seconds. Was that long enough for you or not? Typically, we want to keep it about 3 seconds because we don't want kids to count. We want them to look at the things that matter and then be able to hold that in their mind and try to make a guess of what that is. So, were you able to tell how long that pencil was? Put it in the chat if you think you know. And then I'm going to bring it up again. Did I trick you? Do we have some people that said 8? Is it 8 inches? Well, let's go on to this one. What about that one then? How long's that pencil? Isn't it the same pencil? Why does that one only go to 6, but that one's at 8? Right? If you look closely at that ruler, it's a broken ruler. I love using broken rulers because kids get so stuck in just looking at the end number. They aren't paying attention to what's happening in between or where we even started. One of the biggest issues with measurement is that kids are not paying attention to those units and the iterations that are happening, and all they're seeing is the last piece. But sometimes rulers are broken. So we have to start at a different spot. So by having a broken ruler, it makes them really pay attention to how many iterations of whatever we're using is in that picture. Okay, so that's one example. Come back to me here and we'll have another one. Here it is. And apparently I didn't make it disappear. Oh, I had to click it to disappear. All right, I wanted that one to disappear quickly too, because the point of this is if you've done a lot with 5s and 10s, then having the block set up like this where the color changes at 5, it's easy for those kids to see how long the pencil is. It's 8 blocks long because I saw that it was all of one color and just 3 of another, or it left 2 off. So if you're constantly using sticks of the blocks that are 10 because you have 5 of one color, 5 of another, which is a big number sense concept, right? We can use those sticks of 10 to then measure things and use subitizing to help them measure it. Okay, so you're incorporating both at the same time. You're measuring, but you're also getting kids to subitize. Of course, you're still going to have some kids who are counting 1 by 1 by 1. That's going to happen. But as they build their subitizing, they get more comfortable with it and they'll start to see things a whole lot quicker. Okay, there it disappeared. And I brought it back. Okay, I was a little off on this. All right, so number routines with measurements. Have an image that shows an object next to some kind of measuring tool. I showed it with a ruler, I showed it with blocks, it could be with Post-it notes, it could be with paper clips. What are things that you use a lot to have kids measure that are non-standard beyond just the ruler, okay? Once the image is no longer visible, have the students write down the measurement or draw what they saw or share with the partner. Or you can have them do all of it, okay? It's up to you. But we want them to have to think about what they saw visually and describe it in some way, whether that's to write it down, draw it, or share with a partner, okay? Then you're going to discuss as a whole group to get kids describing what they saw and how they determined what the measurement was. And then show that image again to discuss the accuracy and to see if they need to adjust their idea anymore and to clarify any misconceptions the kids have. And then you just repeat with more images, okay? So some of the things that kids are working on with their vocabulary, they're describing, they're counting things, they're iterating links, and depending upon what you're using, they're measuring. Okay, so the images I'm using in here, they are actually in our Build Math Minds membership site, the PD site. I've created number routines that go with everything that we're talking about here that are available for our members. And so these quick images will be in there and available for you to use. Okay, let's do another one. Are you guys ready? We're not going to do measurements this time. This time we are doing time. Okay, quick image with time. Okay, what time do you think it is? Can you describe what you saw? What did you notice? Right? Put anything in the chat that you thought was helpful. Right? And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be that they will get the correct time on the first time I show it, but they should have a way to describe what they're seeing. Okay, so let's come back to this. And it doesn't, if you notice, I did some shading in here. Some of the quick images, I have a shading piece on there because I want to help highlight the half, right? It's half past 12. What do we call that? 12:30. Are you sure it's 12:30, not 1:30? How do you know? Right? We could talk about all kinds of things with this. Okay, here's another one. Okay, and then it goes away. All right. So here it is again. I won't make it last too long, but think about all the discussion that you could have with your students about these quick images, about what they notice, remember the benchmarks? Well, guess what? There's certain benchmarks when it comes to time as well, right? And we want to help highlight those with students and talk about what those benchmarks are and why they are so important. Okay, so here's the rundown for doing a number routine of quick images with time. Again, you're going to show the image that shows times on an analog clock, and I typically leave it to on the hour, the quarter, or half hours, okay? Because those are more subitizable. Like we're not good even as adults, like when it's 20 after or 27 after, right? But if it's a quarter after or a quarter till, if it's a half past, we're good at that. Or if it's at the hour, we can see those quickly, right? Once the image again is no longer visible, have them write it down, draw what they saw, and share with a partner. Then talk about it whole group, and then discuss any clarifications that need to happen. And just so you know, with time, there is a lot because those analog clocks are tricky, right? So there's going to be a lot of clarifications that you're going to have with the students. And then just repeat with more images. So again, we're doing lots of vocabulary and describing. There might be some counting in there. Or you might have kids who are able to subitize those images with the clock. And then, of course, we are working on time. Okay, let's try another quick image with something else here. You ready? Come on back to the screen. Here it comes. Okay, what was there? Describe what you saw. Draw what you saw. Tell a partner what you saw. Okay. We'll go a little bit faster here. Yeah, do quick images with money. Kids don't have a lot of experience with money. So yeah, you do have to help them recognize coins first before you do quick images with them. And they should be able to tell how much each coin is worth. However, even if they don't know how much it's worth, you don't have to ask that question. You don't have to say how much money is shown here. You could just ask them to describe what they see, right? And they might say, well, I saw 2 that were brownish and 4 that were silverish. Oh, okay, so what do we call those silverish ones? What do we call those brownish ones? Does anybody know what they're worth? How much money is that for each silver one? And then you can have a little value of money discussion as you're doing this routine. Okay. As kids start to get a little better with money, you can also then show it and then take some away. So if you notice here, there's our same amount. Now I'm going to take some away. Can you describe to me what we took away? Again, I don't have to know how much money got taken away. I want them to describe what it was. Okay. And yeah, of course, I want them to be able to tell me how much money that is. Okay. But the reason that we don't spend a lot of time on money in math time is because it's more of a cultural thing than a mathematical thing. That's why I'm using US coins because I'm in the US. If you are watching this from another country, yours is different. That's why the money issue and helping kids learn money and understand your money system should be done in social studies time. And then we use money as a context in mathematics. We can use it as a context for story problems, but it is not a mathematical concept. It is a context that we can use, but it is a cultural or society type of concept, not mathematics. Okay, so when you're doing quick images with money, again, show images with coins, but they need to be arranged in some subitizable visuals. If you noticed, I had them set up like just two, and then the four with two on top, two on bottom. If you are using those coins, make sure they're subitizable. Follow the dice patterns. Dice patterns are always nice. And then if I go above 5 or 6, I will usually do 5. I'll make the 5 image and then extra off to the side. So I'll do a 5 and then a 2, a 5 and a 3 to show 8 and so on. So because kids recognize 5 a whole lot faster. Our fingers are wonderful for that because we have 5 right here. So it's basically the same. You're going to have them describe, draw it, share with a partner, and then discuss it together, clarify any misconceptions, and then just repeat with more images. So again, you're doing lots of vocabulary and describing things. You're comparing, sometimes sorting with money because they might not be sorted. I gave you an easy one, but sometimes I might combine dimes and pennies. I try not to do dimes and nickels because they're both silver. And if kids aren't familiar with them, they're harder to tell the difference between. So I will combine sometimes pennies with something else though. So they may need to sort. There's definitely sometimes some counting. I would prefer that they subitize, right? That they instantly can tell how many based upon the shape, but some kids might be counting. And then of course we are dealing with money. So this is one that highlights money. Another favorite of mine is slow reveal graphs. A few years ago, Jill did a session for us on slow reveal graphs. And if you're not familiar with them, go to slowrevealgraphs.com. Is it .com? Is that what I'm covering it? I can't really see what it says. But the link will be in your slides. And if you're a Build Math Minds member, just search Slow Reveal Graphs inside the membership site and her session will come up. So if you've never done Slow Reveal Graphs, basically you take any graph and you hide all the labels and all the numbers. Any kind of label for the axis, the title, any numbers, you hide it all. And all they're seeing is basically the visual. And then you ask your students to just talk about and share, what are they noticing? What do they wonder about this graph? And then slowly you just start revealing pieces of the graph. You start showing another layer of it, like you're going to show the axis label. You might show some data points. You might show the title. I like to show the title at the very end often, but you're just slowly revealing parts of the graph. And then along the way, every time you reveal a new layer, you talk as a class about what they're thinking now about that graph. Okay. So things that happen when you're doing slow reveal graphs. You're definitely working on data. So I highlighted that one. Sometimes kids might be counting. There's a lot of comparing and often comparing without numerals because the numerals aren't out there, but they can see that one part of the graph is a whole lot higher or longer than another part. They're doing lots of vocabulary and describing because often they have to come up with their own words to describe it because there aren't labels on the graph yet. Okay. That was all for number routines. I hope you like those. I hope they give you something to start trying out right away. And let's move into word problems. Now, you can take any old word problem that's out there and put some measurement ideas inside of it. So I'm going to give you some ideas. Comparison problems are really awesome for measurement. Okay. They are contextual problems that where basically you're comparing lengths, or you're comparing amounts of money, or you're comparing something about time. Okay, and one thing I want to draw your attention to, I'm not going to talk about it every time I bring a problem up, but I want you to pay attention to the numbers that I'm using in these story problems because they are intentional. Often I am using a certain benchmark number to highlight those ideas because those benchmarks, when it comes to measurement, are super huge to help students use those benchmark numbers, get to the benchmark times, the benchmark measurement, or, like tens and fives will happen a lot in what I'm doing. Or if you use bigger amounts, you're wanting to get to the next 50 or 100, things like that. So be very intentional about the numbers that you are using in your word problems. And so take a look at the ones as I'm showing you throughout this, what numbers I'm using, and see if you can see how they might help kids out. So if you're not familiar with the word problem types, you can Google that. Annalise Record is doing a session during this summit about problem types and about visuals that help kids with problem types. If you're a member of the Build Math Minds PD site, we have mini courses. Annalise has done mini courses about the problem types. There's lots of information out there about the problem types. So I'm not going to spend too long on it. But this is what comparison problems look like. And I made some that are measurement specific. So when you're doing comparison, the typical type of comparison problem is this first one on the left here, where it's difference unknown. The red tower is 7 blocks tall. The blue tower is 10 blocks tall. How much taller is the blue than the red? I don't have that in there, but that's what we usually say, right? But we talk about it a lot in the more, how much taller, how much longer. But we also need to talk about and give kids the fewer version, the smaller version. So each of these problem types, there's also the way that you can word it that is trickier for kids. It is trickier, and I'm not trying to trick them. We just need to have them have exposure to it. And if you go watch Annalise's session, she will be talking about ways to have kids visualize this so that these kinds of problems aren't tricky to them. Okay. So again, these are just some examples of comparison problem types. But again, I try to use different contexts. You could use the same context for every single one of these. I just wanted to show you some different types of context that you could create to have some comparison problems. And typically what we recommend is that you use context that matter to your students. Your students may not care about the towers, but there may be something that they do care about that is measuring something in the room. Create it with that in mind. Use your students' names, the things they care about, but bring in some measurement ideas, okay? And when we are doing these, we're definitely doing lots of vocabulary and describing. They're comparing things. We often see kids counting because they'll want to build this story problem out. They'll want to model it. They're often iterating links to try to get these ideas visualized for themselves. And of course, you can have them working on time and money based upon the way that you write the story problem. Okay. This is an example of some multiplication/division type of word problems. They are also compare problems, and you can do the same thing as kids get up into the larger grades. I wasn't going to share that too much, but I just want you to see that these ideas still transfer as kids get into upper elementary. Okay, another popular word problem that works great for measurement ideas is the part-whole problems. So it's when you have two parts and they come together to make a whole, or you know the whole amount and you're missing one of the parts, or there's also where both add-ins are unknown. So you know the total amount, but you don't know how it's broken up. And so there's lots of different answers that could be possible for that. So this is an example of some of those story problems that you could create using these types of story problems. Okay. But basically, the general gist of part-whole is where there's two or more. In my examples, I kind of I messed up a little because I didn't show you some examples where there's more than two parts. I try not to always give the same type because I don't want you to think that's the only way it can be done, but you can totally write some of these in different ways. Like the one about in the middle where Jax was exercising for an hour and 15 minutes, and I said he lifted weights for 45 minutes, and then the rest of the time he spent on the treadmill. You could totally break that up even more and say something like he lifted weights for 45 minutes. He did the bicycle, the Peloton, if you want to do that, for 15 minutes. And then the rest of the time he spent on the treadmill, right? So you can have lots of different parts in there. You just decide how you want to break it up. Okay. All right. So again, a lot of these same measurement ideas are in play here. And then word problems can also come from your data, right? If you are creating graphs with your students, use the data in those graphs to create contextual problems based off of that. Because if they do some kind of survey and they spend all this time getting all this data, don't just let it sit there. Use that context as a way to create more contextual problems. And again, there's a lot more different types of problem types. So you don't have to just use part, whole, and the compare problems, but I think those ones lend nicely to measurement style of problems. Okay, let's move into games, one of my favorites. So games are a great way to just practice something repeatedly with students, and they don't even realize that they're practicing because they're having fun doing it. So what a favorite one is a measurement scavenger hunt. So students are basically going to go around the room to find objects that are within a certain category. So it could be a certain length, mass, volume. It could be within a range of length, mass, or volume. Like you don't just say, like, go find me something that is 10 inches. You could have it be something that is 10 inches or lower. And then this group over here has to find stuff that's longer than 10 inches, right? But they don't get a measuring tool. They have to do it by estimating first, okay? That's what I like. I mean, you can give them a measurement tool, but I like them to have to go around and try to see if they can get things that are within that parameter. And then if they get like points or something. I mean, if you want to do it competitively, they get points for how many items they got within that category. And then, whichever group got the most, then they're the winner for that scavenger hunt. So it can be categories, like very specific, where it's fine. You have to find as many things as you can that are 11 inches and only 11 inches. Or you can be more broad, like items that are smaller than 6 inches, and then they have to find things that are within 6 inches to a foot. Okay, so you can put parameters around it. You just have to decide what you want. So we're definitely measuring a lot of stuff with this one, because once they bring it back, then we are going to have them measure it to verify if it fits within the category that we specified. We want them to be using lots of vocabulary in describing when they're sharing with the group. They're doing some comparing. You can easily even have them like sort things. So once they get them, they have their group of everything that's less than 6 inches, then you can ask them to put them in order from the smallest to the largest. And same with the other group that's maybe from 6 inches to 12 inches. So you can add lots onto this, okay? All right, another game is race to whatever you want to put in the blank, okay? So basically, the gist of it is that the players are going to roll dice and then build out a tower or links of something. And they have to try to be the first to get to the designated measurement, whatever the blank was. And then the first player that reaches that target height or length or width or whatever you're asking is the winner. So an example, you can play race to 10. And partners take turn rolling dice, and they are building a tower of blocks based, like if they roll a 2, they get to put 2 on their blocks, on their tower. Then their next roll, they roll a 3, they get to put 3. And then the first player that gets to 10 wins, okay? And again, I'm using 10 in that one because I want them to be thinking about that benchmark of 10. How close am I? What do I need to roll to get the next 10? And then when I win and I'm the one that gets to 10, how far away was my partner who didn't win? What do they need to roll to catch me, kind of thing. And then another one is race to 1 foot. Again, I'm putting benchmark numbers in as that blank. So we're racing to a foot, and each player has a ruler or some kind of measuring device. And then, like, let's say we're using paper clips. You could use any kind of something to count and have them iterate it over and over and over again. So on their turn, they're going to lay out how many ever paper clips they just rolled. So if they roll a 3, they get to lay out 3 paper clips, right? And then each person takes their turn, and then the one that gets their paper clips all the way to the foot mark, then they are the winner, okay? And so it just helps them get familiar with what a foot looks like. How many paper clips does it take to make a foot? How many sticky notes would it take to make a foot, right? Whatever you're using as that thing that they get to iterate over and over to race to whatever that benchmark would be. Okay. And in this one, they are doing lots of comparing. They might be sorting things out. There's lots of counting. They're iterating lengths, and they are measuring. All right. Another game is the estimation challenge. This is done more whole group, so that you're going to show an object to the whole class, and then you're going to tell them a measuring item that they're going to be using. So you're going to dictate what that item is. So let's say you hold up your math book and you tell the class that they have to use dice to measure the width of the book. And so you're going to say, what's your estimate of how wide this book is if we're only using dice to cover it? And just one width across, okay? And then they can work in small groups or on their own to make their estimate, and then you're gonna measure it, right? You're gonna put the recordings up there of what all the guesses are, and then you're gonna measure it and see how close they are to the actual amount, okay? And you can use standard measuring units. You can use it like the ruler. You could have them actually use inches or centimeters or whatever your standard measurement is, depending upon their grade level, right? If they're kindergarten, you're not going to ask them how many inches wide is this textbook. You're going to use paper clips or the dice or something like that. So it's just up to you to decide what you're going to have them measure, but you're going to just do them fairly quickly. You can also do them kind of related. So if you have an object, but then you might have something that kind of relates to it, like 2 of those or 4 of those or whatever it might be. Like, just keep building on it. Lets them see connections between things. So you're doing lots of vocabulary when they're talking about it. They're comparing, they're counting, they're iterating lengths, and of course, they're measuring. So a reminder, these were our big ideas in pre-K to 2 for measurement, but we also need to be infusing these 8 number sense concepts in. How can I also be pulling in the subitizing? I could be using the 5s and 10s, right? Be creating towers that have 5 and 10 and use those to measure things. Lots of counting, having them verbally count, object count, asking how many once they've counted, right? Seeing the spatial reasoning is how this thing compares to this thing. What's the same? What's different? 1 or 2 more or less. What's going to happen if we add 1 more onto this? Will we go past the measuring point that we were supposed to hit, or are we going to still be less than it? Those benchmarks, what are the benchmarks when it comes to your measuring? What are your standard units of measurement? And what are some benchmarks that you really want kids to understand? And then part whole is helping them understand that those parts that they're iterating over and over again become the whole measurement. Right? And you could break those apart to talk about the measurement a little bit easier. Okay, so after this session, here's what I would love for you to do. Include the 3 types of experiences. Be doing number routines that also include measurement ideas. Be doing word problems that have context that are measurement. And then play games. And it doesn't have to just be number games. You can do lots of measurement stuff as well. And of course, keep focusing on number, because number should be 85% of what you are talking about in pre-K to 2nd grade, but infuse those measurement concepts as often as you can, right? Because the way that kids build their math understanding always comes from the way that they are experiencing mathematics. So let's provide some great experiences for your students. So thank you again for coming to my session. I will see you in other sessions, and I'd love to see you inside of the Build Math Minds PD site to get even more access to items that we have to help you implement all the things that you're learning here at the summit.